Hi everyone. So today I'm going to go over something that is one of the most popular questions that I get asked all the time, and that is how do you hedge EVE, economic value of equity. So I'm going to make this really simple so that if you're a beginner, then you can just follow along, and I'm not going to assume that you know anything. So let's get started. To begin with, I'm going to talk about what is economic value of equity, why is it important, and what is the repricing gap, and why do you need to hedge. What is economic value of equity? So essentially, you're looking at the time value of money. So the time value of money means if somebody gave you £100 100 years ago versus if somebody gives you £100 today, 100 years ago you'd have been able to buy way more stuff with that money. Even though it's £100, like the difference between £100 then and £100 now, there's no monetary difference in the money itself. The difference is the value of what that money means and what it can buy you. So essentially that's all it is. It's that simple, and people get quite confused about economic value because they think net interest income is the easy one. You're just looking at how much profit you're going to make from the interest rates. Economic value, you need to switch mindsets of how you think about this. So instead of thinking what's your profit from whatever you have, you need to be thinking what's that money actually worth, because that's something that can really trip you up and something that a lot of banks have actually collapsed from quite recently. So in order to do this, we're going to look at the repricing gap first, and we're going to look at what is a behavioural gap and what is a contractual gap. So repricing gap is really simple. It's just the date when something can change interest rate. So for example, if you have a mortgage and you've taken it out for 25 years, so these monthly payments are every month for 25 years, and then it goes down to zero essentially. Well, you'll notice on a mortgage that you'll have a fixed period of interest. Now for the UK, this is shorter and it's about 2 years, it can be 3 years, or it's 5 years. For the US, it tends to be fixed the whole 25 years. So it depends what country you're dealing with. However, I'm going to use the UK as an example. So rather than putting 25-year mortgages in a 25-year bucket, the maturity date and the repricing date of that mortgage will be different. So if it's got a 5-year fixed repricing date, it's going to go in the 5-year fixed bucket. So I'll show you what that looks like. So what you can see here is that the mortgage is a 5-year fixed mortgage, so it's gone into the 5-year bucket. It's also an asset, so it's gone onto the asset side of the balance sheet. So that's your repricing gap. It's as simple as that. It's just a chart that'll have 5-year is where you've got that mortgage, so the 5 years where you've got that position. Essentially, it's an open position. So next, what I'm going to talk about is what this is made up of. So essentially, this is a contractual gap. So you have a contractual gap. What that means is if you take out all your contracts, which is why it's called contractual, if you take out all your contracts, write down when everybody is going to pay their mortgages off according to their contracts, then it will be exactly this. But what you'll find is in real life, behaviourally, customers don't do what contract says they're going to do. So they might have a 5-year fixed, but say they want to move house early, they want to just pay off the mortgage and get a new deal with another bank, in which case that's not actually 5 years, it's more maybe 3 years, maybe 4 years. And they might have to pay a fee to come out of that early. So that's the difference between your contractual gap and your behavioural gap. So the one that you want to be hedging is your behavioural gap, because your contractual gap is just your behavioural gap without any assumptions, basically. So if we take the same position and we say that that is 100 million of mortgages in the 5-year bucket. So let's say we've taken on 100 million of 5-year mortgages. So what we now have to do is say how much of those are we going to hedge. So let's say we're a bank that gets all the funding in using current accounts, which means all of our funding is overnight. What that means is customers can take it out overnight. The interest rate can change overnight. It's very variable. So to make things easy, the whole 100 million is funded with overnight deposits. So that is our contractual gap. And now I'm going to break it down and say behaviourally, we've got the prepayment assumption, which is what I just spoke about with customers moving house. We could also have a situation where customers have said they're going to go through with the mortgage and they're in pipeline, which means they've signed the contract, they're ready to go, but maybe the house has fallen through last minute, so they don't actually convert and become a customer of yours. So a certain percentage of that 100 million is going to be pipeline. So we've got a certain percentage for prepayment and a certain percentage for pipeline. So of that 100 million, to make things simple, let's say 10 million is prepayment, so that's 10%. Another 10 million is pipeline, so that's another 10%. So what we're left with is 80 million in this bucket. So to make things really simple, I'm not going to go into all the details about other assumptions that you might include, such as current account assumptions and capital spreading assumptions. I'm just going to keep things really simple and say you've got 10 million prepayment, you've got 10 million pipeline, therefore you've got 80 million left that you need to hedge. When you're hedging, what does that mean? You need to do an 80 million swap. In reality, would you actually do an 80 million swap? Probably not, because your assumptions are never going to be 100% accurate, and you know that when you take out the swaps and when you do your hedging. You know it's going to change over time, but you just want to get as close as possible. So if you're like a smaller bank especially, there's no point in you doing all these runoff profiles and trying to get amortizing swaps and matching the amortization of the mortgage with the amortization of the swap. There's no point really, because you're never going to be 100% accurate, so you may as well go for a bullet swap, which just means you take out one swap in one position on the balance sheet. It stays the same for the whole life of the mortgage. So then from that 80 million, what do? We say how much of that is prepayment, how much of that is pipeline, how much of that is paid down by the customers. So roughly of the 80 million that's left, I'm going to say probably around about I'm going to need a 60 million swap. So I'm going to put a little position here in the 5-year bucket and shade it in so you can see it. So there's your position on the other side of the repricing gap, and that there is about 60 million. So when you look at this gap, what you would see is the positions net off. So after you do that swap, you're not going to see that 100 million mortgage position anymore. Behaviourally, what you're going to see is your 100 million mortgage position is going to come down from the pipeline, down from the prepayments. So it's just going to be what's left after that anyway. And then once you do that swap as well, all you've got left is the difference between the two. So because I've said let's do a 60 million swap and it's an 80 million mortgage, for simplicity, we'll say that just leaves a 20 million open position. So what you would see if you're a member of ALCO or you're more senior in the bank and you're not actually dealing with this yourself, what you will see is the ALCO pack will have the repricing gap, and what you'll see in that 5-year bucket is 20 million, because there's a difference between what's the asset position, what's the behavioural assumptions, and then what's the swap as well. So you just see the open positions. So the reason for that is because it's your open positions that drive the interest rate risk. So essentially with the repricing gap, what you're saying is, where are those open positions? Do I need to do any more hedging? Over time, with the hedges matching with the assets, you might say, yeah, that made sense then, but since then, maybe interest rates have changed by quite a few percentages, and customer behaviour has changed a lot. So maybe at the time you had a perfectly matching swap with your mortgages, for example, but over time, as both of those pay down, have you actually got a mismatch? And what do you do about a mismatch? If your asset is bigger than your swap, then all you do is take a swap out against the asset. If your swap is bigger than your asset, you might want to close some of the swap out, but it depends how big the position is and how much sensitivity it's driving. So you could take out something like a treasury bond against a swap, or you could close some of the swap out. By buying a treasury bond, you would basically be putting another asset against that liability position. So essentially, overall, when you're hedging your EVE, all you're doing is you're saying, where are all those open positions on my repricing gap, and where should I hedge to close them out and bring them down towards zero? So the flatter you can get that repricing gap, the better. The problem with having open positions for your EVE is, say if you've got this 20 million 5-year open position, then in 5 years you can't say that £20 million is going to buy you the same amount of stuff as you can say today. So that's that time value of money thing that I was talking about in the beginning, that you can't assume that because you've got that much money today, it's going to be worth the same in the future. So that's why it's important that you're charging that interest rate for mortgages. That's kind of the whole point of charging an interest rate for your assets, is you need to match the time value of money and make a profit on top of that. So if you were just giving people money and lending it out for 5 years on 0% interest rate, you're not just net zero, you're losing money in terms of value, because the time value of money means that that money in the future is going to buy you less stuff than the same monetary amount today. So that's the issue with the time value of money, and that's why it's really important to hedge your economic value. So I hope you found this quick tutorial useful. I basically run the Global Banking Hub. I wanted to create a platform where you can easily find any of the information that you need. I publish articles every week, short video courses which are for members. You can just log into your account, go into the members area, watch the video course. As you're watching the videos, they tick off, and then at the end of the videos you have the option to take a certificate. So essentially you get a series of 5 questions which are written questions, and all you have to do is fill in your answers to these written questions, and then email them across to me. I'll personally review all the answers myself and sign off on those certificates myself. So that's why having a certificate from the Global Banking Hub can really advance your career, because recognised for being qualitative. So if you're interested in becoming a member, then please check out the hub. There's free resources as well. We've got the articles, the videos, we've got educational explainers where you can look at whatever topic you want: interest rate risk, liquidity, capital, funds transfer pricing, anything that you want to know more information about. It's all on the Global Banking Hub. So it's globalbankinghub.com. And if you're interested in becoming a member, you'll be working alongside me, sending me your questions. I'll be marking them. I'll be sending back your certificates. I'm really excited to work with some of you, and I really hope that I get the chance to hopefully meet some of you in the future. And otherwise, thank you for watching and have a lovely week.